Testing. So good evening, everyone. So for you folks here, is there anybody very new to meditation? Everybody usually sits regularly, huh? Yeah. What's the time period that you usually sit for? 20? 45. About this group? Usually 30? This evening's? 40 to 45?
Yeah, that's what I do too. 45.
Mm-hmm. Anybody sit for a long time? An hour, 2 hours? 3 hours, a few days. Did you ever hear stories of that? People sitting in meditation for days. What do we have? There was recently the big story of the Buddha boy in the news. Did you see that? Haven't heard of the Buddha boy? That's the unofficial name.
Nepal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. As a young man, I don't know if he was in his teens or early 20s, in Nepal, and he was sitting under a tree, much like the Buddha did, in the woods, in the middle of nowhere, sitting for what it seemed like a long time without moving, and at least for a whole day, where there was, the length of sunshine, just sitting there all day. And word spread, and eventually people heard, wow, there's this kid, it just looks like he's sitting and not moving at all, not eating. You don't see him doing anything. And eventually they had people come with cameras, and they had to cage off the area because people were so curious they'd go in and disturb him and maybe kind of try to throw rocks at him to see if he would move, and I'm sure kids went by to tease him and try to see what was up. Eventually they filmed it, and they made a documentary, maybe a few documentaries, about this young guy who sat for a long time, and they're not sure for how long. And he didn't seem to eat anything, or eat much. And eventually, though, he stopped sitting, and he started to share about his experience. And now he's teaching. There's a lot of people who almost worship the Buddha boy now. I don't know his real name, but his hair was short, now it's very long. He was wearing rags before, but now he's wearing white garments and giving talks in that area. Doesn't seem to be Buddhist or say that he's representing the Buddha's teachings. He's just speaking about peace, and he's concerned about world peace and promoting these ideals. But he seemed to sit for a really long time and not budge. And his posture didn't look so good, actually. Maybe he didn't ever learn meditation from anyone, but he was often like this, and his head kind of tilt to the side. So even with bad posture, sitting for a long time, which, even if you have very good posture, sit for a long time, even if your legs are used to it, at some point you're going to experience discomfort, for sure. As long as you're human and have a physical body, there'll be pain. So imagine sitting with bad posture. When we slouch, discomfort comes even more quickly. But incredible determination to continue to sit. It seems that for most of us, even for meditators, long-time practitioners, that we're really controlled by feelings, pushed around by feelings. And if we look at the Buddha's teachings on why we suffer, or why we experience stress and all these different anxieties, all of our problems, that we seem really controlled by feelings. Another way to put it is well trained to respond to feelings habitually. Or maybe hardwired. Conditioned. It's another way to talk about it. And do you often read about Buddhism, books on practice? You mentioned before, some of you are reading a book. That's a biography, though. The one you mentioned, I heard you say there's a nun. Is it that German nun?
Yeah, Aya Germa.
But I'm sure within that book she also talks about her understanding of practice too, right?
Yes.
Not just her personal experience.
Right. It is kind of a primer on Buddhism.
It's mostly about it's Dharma Talks. It's just a book of Dharma Talks.
I see, her Dharma
So it
Talks.
is on practice.
So, I think many of us are familiar with some of those basic principles of the Buddha's teaching. And if we look at the teaching on the 5 skandhas, do you know that one? The 5 skandhas, or sometimes it's called the 5 aggregates. Just a way to look at or understand how the body and the mind works. You could just say body and mind. It's a simple way to talk about it. Body and mind, and how it works in terms of problematic functioning. How the body and mind works and creates suffering. The 5 skandhas is a look at that. Chinese is what? Yun. The 5 heaps, or the 5 collections. And if we look at the body and mind in this way, it can really show us how feelings and how our approach towards our feelings can be really problematic. And not that feelings themselves are the problem, but how we respond to them, or how we deal with them, is the crux of our problems, our anxieties. So the first skandha, which is kind of simple, is which one? Form, which refers to the physical body, physical aspect, bones, muscles, all this stuff, and also the physical environment. And it could be analyzed into many different elements, but it's interesting that within Buddhism they just choose 4, the most basic ones. What is it? Earth, water, wind, and fire. It just uses those 4 to represent all these different elements within the body. They either have qualities of being solid, like earth, or water actually represents not only fluid, but cohesion, the ability to stick together, which is very interesting. You know, without a liquid or a water, how would things stick together? Hard physical objects, especially in the physical body. You know, water is a key aspect of cohesion, keeping things together. And then, you know, fire represents the heat, warmth of the body. And wind is what? Just movement, circulation. So it's a simplification, but it's very interesting how it encompasses all the physical elements just with having those four qualities. But the very next one is feeling. It's listed as the second one, but it's interesting that in order to have feeling, there still needs to be an ability to be aware, which is actually listed last, consciousness. So when we think of these five aggregates, we can't necessarily think of them in order. It's like first you have this one, then you have that one, and they're totally separate. It doesn't really work like that. We have to think of them or look at them as all completely interrelated, not necessarily having a particular order. If we just had a physical body and a physical environment, we wouldn't have feeling. It's like a corpse. A corpse has the physical qualities, but if a corpse bumps into something, or there's no feeling. It sees, it doesn't see, there's no sight possible. So consciousness represents, in one way, the ability to be aware. And with that ability to be aware, then we have all of our functions of sight, or seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. And, of course, thinking and reflecting. So, with the ability to be aware, or consciousness, which also includes not just awareness in this present moment, but what else can we do otherwise be aware of the present moment with this thinking? We remember, or we can project into the future. And we can make use of all of our previous experiences. Why? Because they're all stored. So consciousness, sometimes it's described in the early discourses of the Buddha as just being seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching, and then it just says, mind consciousness. It's very vague in many of the Buddha's talks. But consciousness includes the ability to store all of our experiences of all those senses, and even our experiences of thinking and reflecting. And most importantly, our training, we call it, or our development of habits, conditioning, which is often called karma. The word karma, which we use left and right sometimes. Oh, it's your karma that you have that problem. Karma includes originally the meaning of action that's intentional, but it also includes this really key function of habitual tendency, or karmic force, it's called. Karmic force, maybe we have no idea to relate to that, but habitual tendency, right away we know that there's something else working there within consciousness, not just this present moment of awareness or the ability to think, but there's something pushing us every moment to respond to things in a certain way. And so this all of this is stored in consciousness. And if we go back to feeling and how this relates, feeling in Buddhism is, usually the word is translated as feeling. And it can be, it can be described more simply. But I was doing a bit more research recently into how feeling is used within the Buddha's teaching, from the Buddha's Dharma Talks and later to the treatises of the later masters who expounded on the Buddha's teaching. Now, the Buddha's Dharma Talks themselves are really simplified, probably just because the people who were remembering them in the beginning, you can't remember everything. Although they say Ananda, his attendant, remembered every word, you have to wonder, well, even if he could remember every word, could the folks after him who were memorizing all these talks remember everything? And we may think, well, sure, they're enlightened. Or sure, they're Buddhist. They wouldn't make a mistake. But for sure, details are forgotten, omitted, changed. So the Buddha's talks that were transmitted orally for a few hundred years, they're really like an outline of the practice, a basic outline. Then later on, after things were written down, then you have these treatises or long essays by masters where there are hundreds of pages of written description of things like what does feeling really mean. But to categorize them more simply, maybe you remember, how many feelings are there from what you remember? Feelings. What does feelings refer to? How many kinds are there? Remember?
3. Pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral.
Neutral.
I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's one way that they were categorized. Yeah. Something which could be called, it feels good. Something that doesn't feel so good, unpleasant. Something neutral, which is kind of, well, it's not good, it's not bad. Not pleasant, not unpleasant. And in other places there are feelings which are divided into physical and feelings which are divided into mental. The physical being just a feeling or a sensation that comes from contact of the body, the first 5 senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. It's more of a direct sensation of some kind of contact. Put your hand on the floor, what do you feel? Before you even think about it, there's either coldness or warmth, hard or soft. And could be still classified as pleasant or unpleasant. And it's more of a physical nature. Later on, talking about mental feelings, they would say joy or sadness. Yo and shi in Chinese. Joy and sadness, right? Yo can generally be sadness, which is more of an emotional thing, coming from the mind, meaning from that 6th sense of when we think about something, or reflect on it, or make a judgment about it. And it's not just a physical, more direct sensation. It's a sensation which could be in combination with the physical sensation, but then there's reflection, and there's even a lot of mental activity happening. And then we have emotion. It's a more mental thing, or somehow a combination, or something in between body and mind, or just a combination. Emotions we feel in the body, of course, but they're still generated by this mental activity, thoughts, and reflecting. So feelings, just that one word really covers a lot. Pleasant, unpleasant, physical, mental. Neutral, which is vague, but neutral has a meaning of the feeling could be not so clear. or we're not clear about the feeling. When the mind isn't clear, that's when we feel kind of neutral. It's neither good nor bad. If you're so tired that there's just this, even though there's this racket going on, you're so tired, you're just like, oh, who cares? Like dozing off. Where if your mind was clear and sharp and there was distracting noises, you may be like, who is that? And we'd feel unpleasant. We'd have unpleasant emotions. Sadness, or you can say negativity. Neutral sometimes comes from not being clear. Mind is hazy, or drowsy, or maybe not drowsy, just hazy. And it could be a haziness, it could just be a cloudiness coming from a scattered mind. Drowsiness is one kind of haziness. Another kind of haziness, or cloudedness of mind, is from just having too many thoughts. So much that you're not really aware of feelings. And we all experience this some of the time. There may be all this stuff happening around us, people around us who maybe even need some help. Our mind is really elsewhere, completely lost in thought. We don't even notice. We maybe even don't notice that they're asking for our help. We don't even see them or hear them. It's an extreme scatteredness or extreme absorption in thought. But there's another kind of indifference or neutral feeling. And you know where that could come from, or how that could be? It's not haziness, not scatteredness. Being numb, which could fall into the more hazy side. It can be a state of mind where it's absorbed in meditation. Mind absorbed in meditation, in a deep state of meditation, is neither excited, which falls in the part of the joyful side, happy, excitedness or happiness, which is really agitated. And a meditative mind, or a mind absorbed in meditation, is also not sad, sunken, depressed. It has a degree of indifference. It's not moved by feelings so much, or moved by what one is experiencing. It's a kind of equanimity or stability.
I was just going to say, it sounds like equanimity.
Equanimity, yeah. And if you notice, the word for equanimity in the teaching of the 4 Brahmaviharas, the 4 limitless abodes, which are positive states of mind in meditation. You know the character for equanimity? What's that? In Chinese? Shi. It's also the same character which is used for a neutral feeling. Because it's really a neutral mind state. But it's still, it's one that you want to cultivate in one aspect of meditation. In one respect, we're cultivating a stability, a neutrality of mind, equanimity, so that in the face of experiences, we're not moved. We're not disturbed. We're not excited. We're not saddened or depressed. Also, we're not just hazy, unclear. So, sa, or neutral, equal kind of state of mind. And so this is covering the different kinds of feeling. Basically, physical or mental, excited, depressed, or neutral, or more even. But we can't look at feeling alone, because feeling alone can't operate by itself. Before we said we need awareness to be able to even have feeling, right? You can also say that quite a few of these feelings don't happen with the next skandha, or the other process described by the next skandha in the order, which is what? Do you remember? Perception. Which is the function of naming and distinguishing or discriminating about experience. You know? When we experience something, very quickly, there's perception. You know, put your hand on the floor, there's an immediate feeling, and maybe very quickly there's, ooh, so cold. Before it even comes out of our mouth, we have this association in the mind. Oh, cold. And language is there. Perception is there. How do we know it's cold? Experience, but also previous experience. You know what cold is, but we also have to know what warm is too. And we have to have a comparison. Wow, so look how quickly all that is happening within a split second. To know it's cold, you also have to have your own experience of cold and warm. And also everybody's experience is different. Not only based on body type, but just on experience. Today we were saying, it's not even 50 degrees out. Oh, it's cold today. People who live high up in Canada, Alaska, it's cold. Come on, people. It's not even 20 below yet. My parents used to live way up there, and they said that you'd go outside and, you know, your runny nose would instantly be an icicle. And in some places it's so cold that if it's windy, your skin will tighten and crack very quickly. So you have to cover up completely. Did anybody live there at a temperature that's that cold? If it's not windy though, it's very interesting that even at like 40 below, you don't have to have a mask or anything on your face. And possible that you don't even have to wear a hat. If it's sunny out, very, very cold, your body is okay. The heat can somehow be maintained around your body.
Mm-hmm.
If it's windy, and of course it's even more biting cold, and the movement, that's where it's very dangerous. So, in a split second, our experiences, associations, based on these previous sensations and also previous perceptions, are just flurrying through the mind so quickly that maybe it's a sensation, a perception of cold, and possibly then emotion in terms of a mental feeling of even dislike. When we react to things, it's kind of funny how quickly all these different things happen, emotions, and we get angry. Oh, I hate this weather. Or, who didn't turn the heat on again? Immediately we think of a person. Who did that? Who put this cold air here? And this reaction is already including the next skandha, which is what? Volition, or will, or intention. Which is, there's not only a perception, a reaction in terms of an image, an idea, a concept about what we experience, but there's that momentum or motivation to then continue to think about it and say something or do something, to act on the perception and the feeling. And all this stuff, which is listed in a certain order, can be hard to really differentiate. Well, who comes first?
It all just happens like...
Right? And then, who really comes first? Because consciousness storing everything, we can say that it already has a collection of sensations, perceptions, intentions, and that momentum of reacting, which is described as karmic force, is, we can say it shows itself through this will and volition. Why do we will to do something? Oh, because we have this momentum of intention. So incredible how such a simple teaching of 5 things heaped together. They're called the heaps, the 5 heaps or aggregates. They're not called the 5 loops, like an order so clear, or 5, chain links. It's heaped together, or it's a mess of physical and mental activity. And if we look at it more closely and see how feelings plays a huge role, what we feel and then how we react has become a problem. Now, reacting to a cold sensation of touching the floor is one thing. Maybe it's not such a big problem in our life. Dealing with the weather, well, I guess it can be kind of a problem sometimes, especially if we've developed a fear of weather, which I guess that's what the weather forecast is for, basically, to feed on our fears of bad weather and feed on our craving for good weather.
We don't even need the weatherman. We can create those. I'll create them
Myself,
myself.
huh? Yeah. Well, we talk to each other about it. One of the first things we talk about. But amazing how the sensation and our conditioned way to respond to things really has become problematic. If we don't like rainy days, we actually may get really depressed with weather like this, where fall, almost every day, it's cloudy, raining, cold. We feel it. We immediately like it, dislike it. We think about it, judge it, hate it, run away from it. Or, I guess, complain. And this whole process of reaction just recycles again and again. We may not even notice it, but we feed it. And I don't know if you know a lot of people who during the season get especially have difficulty with depression during the fall season. If we lived in Alaska, that's another thing, right? Not just the weather, but the lack of sunshine for such a long time. That can be a huge thing to deal with. We could make the argument that, well, it's not enough vitamin D, which I'm actually lacking in vitamin D. Taking pills, taking vitamin D supplements, I feel a lot more energetic, actually. But I didn't really feel necessarily depressed when I was not taking the vitamin D. For sure, I felt like I was dragging a corpse around, which in the Chan tradition there's a saying, who is dragging this corpse around? I really got a sense of, yes, this is almost a corpse. I didn't have much energy to even sit up when I was eating. But I still felt mentally okay. Didn't really feel much depression. Wasn't getting much sun either. Sitting inside my office using the computer, doing administration. So we can also ask, these responses to weather, responses to sunlight, and what's even more complicated, responses to people. People that we work with, people that we live with. Sometimes it really feels that we're stuck in disliking, or even stuck in needing something in particular. We need a certain feeling to then make ourselves feel good and feel happy. That we end up feeling stuck, trapped, in control, controlled by feelings. It's like if there's not at least one day of sunshine, the world is a very dark and miserable place. Or 1 week, if we don't get to do what we usually do at least once a week, which brings us some relief, some kind of joy. Maybe you, I don't know, go to dinner together with friends, or go to a game. I don't know what you folks do for entertainment-wise, or even wholesome entertainment, hiking. We'll go hiking possibly soon. If we don't get to do those things, which are really, we're looking for the feelings that we get from them. Maybe we think that, wow, my life, there's not much joy when those things are not there. And we may find it's really difficult to have joy without that feeling, without those conditions. For practitioners, it may be a bit different, where we know that, yes, going to hang out with people, going to movies, going to see plays or whatever, concerts, that's worldly, or it's not really satisfying. It's fun, but it's not really satisfying. We know that. We also recognize that in life there's hardship, painful feelings, uncomfortable physical feelings. We know we can't escape those. So the practitioner's mindset is a little more mature in that way. It's possible then, though, that for practitioners and people who meditate a lot and regularly, they still may be controlled by feelings. And which feeling do you think that would be?
Meditation.
In terms of those three categories, though, where would that fit into in terms of feeling?
Well, mine is unpleasant. I don't know what everybody else's is, but...
Meditation.
When you said controlled by feeling?
No, I mean, for example, for the person, possibly a practitioner, looking for the feeling that comes from meditation, what would the feeling...
Neutral.
Very calm.
Calm.
Mm-hmm. And more leaning towards this neutral feeling, or equanimity, that we feel in meditation. And it seems that, well, it's good. We know that meditation makes us feel good, right? That's one reason we keep doing it. Sometimes we're not sure exactly what's happening, but we know that we feel good after sitting. Think of even your first time doing meditation. You finish, you're not really sure what happened there, but hey, I feel good. That was good. And we thank our friends. Thank you. Of course, if we had experience of nothing but leg pain, maybe we don't have that good feeling yet. And that pretty interesting. It is really interesting that unless a person practices meditation, maybe they never get to experience what a neutral feeling is in terms of that more positive, neutral but clear-headed situation. They usually just experience the neutral feeling of don't really know what's happening, just about to fall asleep, not really worried about anything, who cares, kind of calm, but then you're sleeping. Meditation, there's that mental clarity, but neutral, stable state of mind, and with that just comes this kind of, could be pleasant, but not excitable, pleasant feeling. Comfort. Meditators may still be controlled by feeling in that they're looking for that. Meditation becomes still a kind of feeling seeking, and that's what motivates the practitioner. I just want to feel good. I don't feel good now. Let me go sit. Let's get these feelings out of here. Take a couple of deep breaths. Sweep away the bad feeling we may feel, the uncomfortable emotion. And come on, good feelings. Where are you? I know you're there somewhere. We just use my method. 1, breathing in, I feel good. 2, breathing out, I feel better, I think. 3, breathing in, when am I supposed to feel good? Oh, there it is. 4, breathing out, I'm starting to feel good. It can be really subtle, looking for that feeling, the equanimity, and that very unique sensation. It's either physical or mental. Feeling seeking with meditation, which maybe they're familiar enough with the method that they can get into it again and again, get back to that place of equanimity. Maybe they're not so familiar with the method, so no matter how hard they try, it may not work. And once they give up, oh, wait a second, here it is. They give up trying, the feeling comes back and, oh great, here it is. Wallow in it, or swim in it for a while. But a problem is that if we're seeking for it, our mind will be agitated. We're looking for the feeling. It's not coming. We start to generate discomfort, uncomfortable feelings. On top of that, we start to judge ourselves, judge the situation. Bad sitting. Another bad sitting. Why? I've been sitting for 3 months as of today. Why is it not regular yet? Why can't I just get into it like the first week? We find agitation if we have that approach of seeking feeling. On the other extreme, meditation, although the feelings can be great sometimes, and they can be neutral, having a human body, it's inevitable that there's going to be discomfort. And even the most flexible person who's really used to sitting, there's going to be unpleasant feeling. And what if you're sick? What if you have a stuffy nose? Did you ever try to use the breathing method with a stuffy nose? Not pleasant, not comfortable. What do we do in those situations? Well, we may be trained to really dislike it. Stuffy nose. Why did my friend have to borrow my neti pot this week? And then we're angry, fighting with the negative or uncomfortable feelings. Mind is agitated again. If we don't fall into either of those extremes, then we can sit pretty well. We're familiar with the method. We can get into it. We can kind of abide there. Abide in equanimity. One of the abodes is to be able to have equanimity of mind. Very stable feeling, stable mental state. Minimal discursive and scattered thinking. Almost like a flow of water that's very smooth. What about when we have to get up and do stuff? We have to work. Even if we don't work, we have to still do things. That equanimity, or that very neutral, stable feeling will break up and will be gone. That person may find themselves depressed after that, disappointed and have a even disgust towards so-called ordinary feelings. Ordinary physical feelings of having to do things and use their body, work hard, and then of course the emotions and thoughts that are stirred up during the day. They may have a disgust towards those things. One guy who came to retreat quite often said that he was at a point in his practice where he could sit and really have a stable mind with very few scattered thoughts. And every day he'd sit at that same time in the morning, early in the morning before work. He'd sit and he'd really enjoy it. But then his alarm would go off, tell him it's time to finish the sitting. His alarm would go off and right away, oh, I have to go to work. And everything he disliked about all the feelings and impressions that he has of work just came in his mind, and he had to scrape himself, peel himself off the meditation cushion and go to work. And it seemed that the feeling he had in meditation wasn't carrying over into daily life at all. He couldn't bring his feeling with him. And on top of that, his disgust towards work, towards all those feelings and impressions. And we can say other people that he had to encounter or other situations he has to encounter, but you can also use the word feelings. When we encounter people, what do we encounter? We're actually encountering our own feelings. Sight. When we encounter people, we see people, we hear people. What are we seeing and what are we hearing? Those are feelings. Not necessarily the actual person. From a certain perspective of Buddhism, everything we experience is centered around consciousness, or the ability to be aware, and feelings. And what we contact are feelings. What we experience are centered around this reaction of our body and ability to be aware, and then objects. But we don't necessarily contact the objects. There's this combination of body, environment, feelings. So our experience of the world, the Buddha said, doesn't depart from feeling. Can't be separate from feeling. And these other things, reactions, perceptions, will. So all of this works together, and it's bound together, and we're conditioned by it, whether we're a so-called ordinary folk, non-meditator, or meditator. Or meditators can be very attached to the feelings of sitting, the feelings of practice environment, and then it ends up not feeling that we're really getting benefits from the practice. And we may forget that the Buddha said the way to enlightenment or liberation is not through feeling good, which maybe these kinds of things turn up on Facebook or Twitter. You know, the way to liberation is, I guess, get as many good feelings as you can. The Buddha, right? They quote the Buddha supposedly for saying these things. Or, once you feel good, that's all you need in life. The Buddha. Meanwhile, someone just thought of it. Yeah, I think the Buddha said that. Sounds right. Actually, the Buddha said, liberation comes from not trying to make yourself feel good all the time, not making sure you can get away from bad feelings, and even not trying to find a place where you can go and just feel neither good nor bad, which is what all his teachers tried to do. Just get into a meditative state where there's really not much of anything. Not much of feeling, but still, a little bit of feeling, subtle feeling, samadhi as it's called. The deepest state of meditative absorption, which are referred to as Interestingly, sometimes there's a certain level which is called nothingness, the sphere of nothingness. You almost don't experience anything at that time. No seeing, hearing, bodily feeling, no discursive thinking, certainly not. You get beyond that even in the early stages. And the most deepest state of equanimity. Do you remember the Chinese for that one? Or maybe even the Sanskrit? I don't remember the Sanskrit. Fei xiang, fei fei xiang. Which is neither perception nor non-perception. Meaning that this feeling and thought in the mind is certainly not like the coarse feeling and the coarse thoughts that we have when we're excited or depressed. But it's not non-perception. There's still subtle elements of feeling, referring to this mental agitation. There's still this feeling there, and you could say it's a kind of perception. The Buddha didn't say just try to get there and you'll be all set. He said the way to liberation from this being conditioned and controlled by feelings and perceptions is just not to cling to them. That's really the key thing to the Buddha's teaching, is to not grabbing onto them. Attaching is another way to say it. Holding on is the layman's way to say it. Usually, whenever we have these experiences and feelings, do you notice that, especially when you're sitting, whether it's an uncomfortable feeling like leg pain, where does our attention go? It's just completely fixated on the most painful sensation in the body, and we're obsessed with it. Oh, my leg pain is back again. And our whole body may convulse with tension because all of our attention is on this pain, on that feeling, fixated on it. And of course, even adding all this other stuff. Oh, why do my legs hurt again? Oh, damn these legs! I should be doing more yoga. All that stuff. Or if it's a pleasant sensation, it's like, ooh, what's this? Is this chi movement that everyone's talking about? And then our mind goes right there again. Oh, wait a second, it's moving. It's moving. Oh, this is it, this is chi. And you follow it. Our attention is fixated on that feeling. Or I remember when I just started sitting, I had these experiences of just my head disappearing, or the feeling in my head going from, this kind of tension, which is usually there, to all of a sudden, like, it feels like the sensation in my head was gone, and I felt like my head was huge. Like I had a limitless head, a boundlessly big but comfortable head sensation, and my attention was just on that. Whoa, what's this? Where did my head go? I knew it was there, but the sensation, the feeling was so different. Immediately the mind is, or the attention, is grasping onto it, clutching onto it. If we look at our meditation session from moment to moment, our mind is fixated from moment to moment on one feeling to the next, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, and also fixating on perceptions, following them everywhere, or trying to push them down. Buddha said, this is the crux of the problem, clinging to all these things. It's not the feeling themselves that's bad. So with our practice, it's important to remember that it's not about feeling good. And feeling bad is perfectly fine. It's not necessarily about having no thoughts. Having lots of thoughts isn't really necessarily so bad. But cultivating the attitude of not clinging, or you could say not being concerned with feelings and thoughts, which at first sounds like contrary to what we stand for in our life. Concerned with good feelings, very concerned with bad feelings, and making sure we get the good feelings and get rid of the bad feelings. We're wired like that, conditioned like that. Practicing not being concerned is not being bothered by feelings and not being fixated on them. So whatever method we use, which there's not too much time to talk in detail about methods, but regardless of the method, we're training ourselves. One huge part of Buddhist meditation is training ourselves to just be concerned with the method, which is a kind of a neutral thought, or often a neutral sensation like the breath. The breath is, you could describe it as a neutral sensation. When we breathe, we don't get, excited, wow. The feeling of the breath doesn't excite us. It's not a depressing or disturbing feeling, it's kind of neutral. But we first start with holding on to, with attention, to one feeling, one simple feeling. And in the Chan tradition, not activating any perceptions about it, not generating thoughts about it, not analyzing it. Other traditions may do that, which is fine, it's their approach. But with the Chan approach, we just place attention or hold attention on one feeling to train us to not be concerned with any other feeling for the time being. So we have a reference point to first develop stability and develop equanimity. But at some point with Chan practice, we need to even go beyond holding on to a feeling of stability, holding on to a stable and clear sensation of body and mind. We need methods to learn how to not attach. Because talking about it is easy, just don't cling, just don't attach. But how do we really do it, since our mind is always attaching to something? So first, we attach to one thing, hold continuously to one thing. Then, we use methods to help us let go of even holding on to one thing. Methods like silent illumination, letting go of all objects, letting go of all sensations and thoughts. Not meaning that they go away right away, but you're not paying particular attention to anything. You're liberating your mind from fixation, which is usually a gradual settling of that process of grasping. Or the method of huato, which is something different altogether, which puts you in a state of perplexity, so that you're unable to be concerned about anything besides this major question of, what is my mind when I'm not attaching? What is an unattached mind? Sometimes called our original mind, or original face. What is my original face? Meaning, what is my mind when I'm not stuck on anything? We're perplexed, we don't know. And that helps us to release that fixation on other things. So this is actually the direction of Buddhist meditation. A training in attentive attachment, holding on to one feeling, eventually learning to let go of fixation on any feeling or any thoughts, liberating the mind from that conditioned process of grasping onto things, being controlled by feelings, controlled by thoughts. So, just thought I'd share that. Maybe you know that already, but I think it's good to hear again and again.
Mm-hmm.
Because probably the next time we go down and sit, we're waiting right away for that good feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But you can remind yourself when you sit, I'm actually training to not be concerned with feelings and thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Your approach to meditation will be totally different. And no matter what happens in your sitting, you won't be upset.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a sitting of non-stop pain, non-stop discomfort, non-stop scattered thoughts, you're fine. You know that's the condition, but at least you're not disturbed by it. And that way our practice really begins to mature, and we start to transform how we practice and the whole direction of practice. And this attitude can carry into any situation in daily life. There's no need to jump for the cushion whenever we get the chance. We're ready to face anything. We're ready for any feeling and any perception. That's the Buddha's mind. That's real equanimity. It's not holding on to a feeling of equanimity. It's not being moved by feeling, perception. So in Chinese, that's what 不动心 means in Chinese, the unmoving mind. Or in English, it's sometimes translated as the unshaken, unshakable mind. It doesn't mean that there's nothing happening in there. It's not moving like you're a stone. Maybe there's lots happening, but you're unshaken, undisturbed by whatever you experience. So this is the direction of the Buddha's meditation. Understanding, conditioning by feeling, and then training in releasing, not clinging to feeling. So